And we're live. Howdy, howdy, everybody. Oh, big yawn. I don't know why my camera always ends up tilted. There we go. A little bit better. Why does baryonic mass arise from the strong field interaction? Yeah, this is a good question. So this is essentially E equals mc squared in practice, right? So whenever you have some quantity of energy, it behaves as if it has inertial mass, as long as that whatever that energy is contained. And so in this case, you have a whole bunch of gluons bouncing around with tons of energy. You have a whole bunch of quarks bouncing around with tons of energy. And these are all contained in a very small space, so they're going to behave as if they have mass. This is precisely the E equals mc squared relation that you would expect from Einstein's special relativity. In fact, most of the baryonic mass is not from the mass of the quarks that make them up for that reason. Does simultaneity have any objective meaning, or is it purely observer dependent? Simultaneity, when two events coincide, that is objectively the case, that those two events coincide. What that means is that they take place at the same time and the same place. If they coincide for any one observer, they will coincide for every observer. However, saying that two things are simultaneous but spatially separated, like they happen at the same time but at different places, that is subject to the reference frame that you're examining. So that is in some sense subjective. What do photons look like? I really want to know. Look around you. That's what photons look like. Literally what you're seeing are photons. Is reality a vector in a Hilbert space? That's my view. Well, my view is that reality is best described by a vector in a Hilbert space, I should specify. What does not locally real mean? All it means is that, so there's kind of two notions that are appearing in kind of fundamental physics. There's this notion of locality, that things can only influence their immediate surroundings, and the speed limit at which they can influence them is determined by the speed of light. And then there's this notion of reality, which is not like reality in the sense of like all of the stuff that exists or things being real. Reality is just the sense that like the property is well defined and absent an observer or absent some sort of measurement. So when we say that the universe is not locally real, what we mean is that one of those things doesn't hold. I asked before about space being flat yet also three-dimensional. Could you explain a bit? I'm having trouble wrapping my brain around a flat three-dimensional space. Yeah, so flat here doesn't mean two-dimensional. Flat just means not curved. That's it. And so when we say that the universe is flat and, well, spatially flat and three-dimensional, what this means is that there's no intrinsic curvature to our universe. The only curvature is going to be coming from, like, mass. What do you think of Eric Weinstein's geometric unity? I don't think anything of it. From Ereboros, the $5. Sending love, Blitz. Also, could you explain the axis of evil? Yeah, the axis of evil is this strange measurement where if you look at the cosmic microwave background radiation, what you can do is you can break it down into these things called spherical harmonics. By the way, I do have a video on this, so you can check it out if you're curious for more details. But you can break it up into these things called spherical harmonics. Spherical harmonics are basically ways to decompose a thing in a into like mathematically tractable terms, basically. So the first spherical harmonic will just be the value. The second spherical harmonic will be a separation between the north and the south pole. The third spherical harmonic will be something like quadrants, right? And so you can break these things up. You can break up any distribution on the surface of a sphere in terms of spherical harmonics. And the point is those spherical harmonics are going to be aligned according to an axis. So like where the separation is in the dipole spherical harmonic, that That depends on an axis. And so the strange thing is that if you do the spherical harmonic decomposition for the cosmic microwave background radiation, some of these axes are very close to aligning, when there's not really a good expected reason as to why they should be. And so that's the axis of evil, these spherical harmonic axes aligning. From Handsome Cat with the $5, can you do a debunk video on Bill Gaida's anti-mathematical physics theory, the rope hypothesis? He's saying modern physics is an irrational religion. I mean, if he's made a viral video about it, then tag me in it, and I'm happy to do a response to it, but otherwise I don't usually do video responses unless the video went viral. The way I see it, otherwise I'm just amplifying a video that otherwise got no traction. From Preston Devaney with the $2, can you explain how gauge boson exchanges work? It depends on how much you know about quantum field theory. It depends on how much you know about differential geometry alternatively. The way to think about it is that a gauge boson is just a single Fourier mode of a... What's the right way to put this? It's a single Fourier mode of the component of a Lagrangian that involves the gauge field. That's what the gauge boson is. It's the single Fourier mode. Now, the Lagrangian involves the way that you relate these particles to, like, these particles that experience forces. How do I want to phrase this? The way that we describe the motion of these particles depends not only on their speed, like we don't just have like a basic equation of motion like F equals ma. There's an additional term. Well, okay, technically it is F equals ma, but that's setting that aside. There's basically an additional term that shows up in the derivatives. Acceleration is the derivative of position, for example. But the point is that there's an additional term that shows up, and this is a result of something called a gauge symmetry. That additional term is essentially a coupling, and that kind of gives you the force, or gives you the potential energy that the gauge boson is associated with. And so it's that field, that potential field, for example, that is then decomposed into Fourier modes, and those Fourier modes are understood as different gauge bosons, and then they're understood as exchanges. From L'Oreal Ashley with the $25. Thank you so much, L'Oreal. It's very generous of you. Are black holes telling us that general relativity is incomplete? Not necessarily. You can make general relativity consistent with black holes without having any singularities. You just have to add some weird quantum stuff in the middle. That doesn't violate general relativity at all. But what it does tell us is that there's something that we don't understand at the very, very small scale, because whether it's the purely quantum stuff, or maybe GR is wrong at the small scale, whatever it might be, it's telling us that something's going wrong. Because if we assume just standard matter, then absolutely GR breaks down. And from Tim Davidson with the $5, there is a point between the Earth and the Sun that would perfectly cook popcorn. I call the popcorn event horizon. Can you calculate its location? I suppose you could, yeah. It depends on how long you want to wait, though. But yeah, absolutely you could. I'm not going to live, though. All right, let's answer some more questions just from the chat. Are you a many worlds or Copenhagen person? I'm a many worlds person. As a biologist, I'm learning so much from your live stream. Well, I appreciate that. Dr. Blitz, you said logic is subjective on one of your streams. Can you explain why you think so? Yeah, I view logic as merely a formalization of the way that humans reason. So humans reason a certain way for whatever reason. No pun intended. We think about things like, you know, we have this intuitive nature of, or this intuitive ability to think about the consequences of certain events taking place. Like, for example, you know, maybe we develop this intuition that whenever we smell a certain smell, it's about to rain. And so we can formalize that in logic. We say, if I smell this smell, then it will rain in a few minutes. I did smell this smell, therefore it will rain. And so I think that the way I see it, like, logic is kind of just inbuilt in. Logic is a formal description of the way that we already think, at least at the intuitive level. Now, sometimes the way that we actually think isn't in line with the way that we typically think. So sometimes we will make some incorrect, we will do some reasoning that is not consistent with the way that we typically reason. And so by formalizing logic in a way that's consistent with the way we typically reason, we're able to catch when we make mistakes that are inconsistent with the way that we typically reason. That's how I view it. And that's not a particularly uncommon view either. Big crunch or heat death? Heat death seems like heat death used to be very, very mainstream. It probably is still mainstream. I'm just not as sure if it's as certain anymore as it was 10 years ago. Big crunch is still speculative, but it's at least on the table. How an observer can distinguish a particle traveling faster than the speed of light versus space-time expanding faster than the speed of light? Well, you can't measure the speed of things unless they're right next to you, right? You get out a ruler, you measure its speed as it's traveling by you, you get it a stopwatch, you figure out how long it takes to pass. And you'll never measure something traveling faster than the speed of light. There's just not a way to like directly measure the speed of something that is not next to you. Can you explain the wave function collapse? Yeah, so in the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, which is where this idea comes from, merely the act of making a measurement, whatever that might be, causes the wave function to go from a vast superposition of many possibilities to just one possibility that is an eigenstate of your measurement device. Now, how that happens, nobody knows. It's essentially treated as magic. From Captain Obvious with the $5. Love your streams. Thanks for answering my questions. What are some things in physics that are axiomatic? That the universe tomorrow will behave approximately like the universe yesterday. That's an axiom of science in general. I'm trying to think of things that are truly fundamental here. This isn't quite at the level of axiom, but it's generally understood as like a correct principle, although it could be wrong and we could reevaluate. But there's generally this idea that we're not in a special place in the universe, whether in time or in space. That the universe elsewhere is basically the same as it is here, just within statistical probabilities. So that's another thing it's not at the level of axiom. It's called the Copernican principle, but it's generally assumed to be true unless you have really convincing evidence otherwise. From Sock Bucket France with the $2. Gravity is getting stronger over time. The sun too? Oh, as far as we can tell, gravity is not changing in strength. No. All right, let's skip down to the bottom. Popcorn won't pop in a vacuum because it needs pressure to happen. That's probably true. Yeah, that's probably true. What happens to a rogue planet after heat death? Well, it's a good question, and it really depends on whether or not protons decay. So if protons do decay, meaning that they become electrons and sorry, I guess it would be positrons and positrons and electron neutrinos, I guess, would be the decay mode or something like this. If protons do decay, then eventually the planet will dissolve. And that would happen fairly quickly on cosmological timescales. However, if protons don't decay, then in principle what you could have is you could have that the rogue planet eventually tunnels into a black hole. So we have quantum tunneling, where things can eventually, like, think of this idea of like if you slap a table enough time, eventually your hand will go through due to like quantum things, due to like the atoms aligning. That could in principle happen for a rogue planet where it would eventually become a black hole. But this would take orders of magnitude larger or longer amounts of time. Why are you looking at my name for? With the £5, thank you so much. What's your view on theory of qualia considering hard problem of consciousness? I would suggest that you ask a philosopher of mind that question. My thinking is merely that qualia is probably, like, we're probably mistaken that qualia is some special thing. But I'm not an expert on philosophy of mind, so. So when I said that the Earth is isomorphic, so I should say that it's not just isomorphic, it's technically not isomorphic, it's just nearly isomorphic because it is bumpy. I meant isomorphic in the category of Riemannian manifolds, right? Yeah, so I'm a differential geometer, right? Like that's roughly what I do. I also do physics, but so it's not just homeomorphic to a round or to S2. It is the round S2 in the Riemannian manifold sense, the surface of the Earth anyway. Why should protons decay if the most energetically favorable element is iron? Well, iron wouldn't be the most energetically favorable element if protons decay, right? If protons decay, then the most energetically favorable element is just an element that has no, it's just a non-atom, right? It wouldn't be energetically favorable. Is the discrepancy between the cosmological constant of vacuum energy from theoretical and cosmological data the place for new fundamental ideas? I suspect probably not. And the reason I say that is because I just don't think that the cosmological constant that you would get from vacuum energy just has anything to do with the way that space is expanding. I suspect that these two things are unrelated, and people kind of assumed that they would be related for, you know, basically elegance reasons. But there was no proof that they would have to be related, right? So I kind of view this as like a almost red herring. How is proton decay measured? Well, you get a whole bunch of protons. You stick them in a place that's really quiet. I mean like quiet radioactively, so there's like not a lot of like light coming in from anywhere. There's not a lot of radiation anywhere. And then you wait and you hope to see a flash of light. And basically this is done by at least in some experiments, by basically filling an enormous tank of water or an enormous tank with water deep underground, so that's protected from other like radiation events, and then surrounding it with essentially cameras, and then just hoping to catch a flash of light. From Sock Bucket France with the $2. Did you hear that? I did. How'd you know? Is there an intuitive reason for why translation equals the exponential of the generator? I'm asking about more general Lie algebras, not just momentum as generator of position translation. Is there a good way to understand this? Well, perhaps the right way to understand it is that, like, if you do a Taylor series of the exponential of the generator, you will get the identity plus the first derivative term. So, you will get the identity plus the generator. And so, in some sense, if the generator is some small thing, then it kind of makes sense, just by like looking at like the first order terms. But I don't really have a good intuition as to why it's like the exponential, or why it's, you know, e to some power rather than like 5 to some power. I mean, I guess if it was 5 to some power, then, you know, of course it would just change by a coefficient. But like, yeah, the only intuition I have is just from a Taylor series kind of view. From Lift Labs with the $5, what kind of shampoo do you use? Love, Juno. It comes in a purple bottle, and I know that that's the most man response I can ever give you, but it comes in a purple bottle, and I think it has like an avocado on it. From J Explorer with the $5, did time flow at the same speed during inflationary epoch as it does now? Would clocks fall out of sync if one of them is in rapidly inflating space? No. So they would have absolutely ticked at the same speed now. As generally the way that you get different, yeah, how do I want to phrase this? Yeah, if you take a clock that is co-moving, then it will always tick at the same speed. And this just falls out just from the metric, just from the form of the metric. You see that it's just dt squared plus a of t squared times the spatial part of the metric. So the dt squared just doesn't depend on time. It has a coefficient of 1 always. Now you can also take a conformal time. Conformal time does change. So if you take an observer that is stationary with respect to conformal time, then sure, or that is, you know, moving along the conformal time like geodesic, then sure it would change. But that's just not what we mean. But when we say like time, usually we don't usually mean conformal time. What is the definition or definitions of energy in physics? The ability to do work. So the ability to do work is kind of like the classical mechanical view of energy. But the more sophisticated view of energy that we kind of use today is it is the thing that is conserved in a system, or it is the quantity that's unchanging or conserved in a system when that system has something called a time translation invariance. So think of the laws of physics that govern a system, not like the system itself, but think of the laws of physics that govern the system. If those laws of physics are unchanging in time, then it would have time translation invariance, meaning that you could move the laws of physics forward in time and they would be the same laws of physics. If that's the case, then there's something called an energy associated with that system. It's a first integral in this case. Well, I guess it's not a first integral technically. Well, Yeah, no, it's a first integral. Then there's something called an energy of that system, and that quantity is conserved. Oh, sorry. Didn't sleep too well last night. How does the universe create gold? Yeah, so from what I've heard, the universe creates most of its gold via neutron star collisions. So you have two neutron stars, they smack together, and you get some serious nuclear reactions. Tips for staying motivated, ensuring I'm disciplined in my math studies, undergrad math major? I have a hard time answering that question because like this wasn't an issue I ran into as an undergrad. I was super motivated as an undergrad. I always did all of my homework. I always did all of my assignments. So I was just really into it. I don't know. I know that that's not helpful. I'm sorry. By the way, y'all, remember to hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure to tap the screen if you're watching on TikTok. More people in here means more questions, which means, you know, more quality physics content. I'm writing an epic about inflation and the evolution of the universe where the various phenomena are gods and goddesses. Would you be down to read it when I'm done? I'm gonna have to pass just because I have so little time as it stands. It sounds interesting though, and I wish you the best of luck. Could I become a physicist if I study engineering? It's possible. It depends on what kind of engineering you studied and as to determine, like, you know, how far behind you are. But yeah, it's possible. Dr. Blitz, can space exist independently of time and vice versa? Is it possible in any case? It's at least mathematically possible. There's nothing preventing this from happening. Like, you can describe these systems perfectly well. The question is whether or not like this is a thing that can happen in like the real world. That's a completely different question. But there was a paper I read fairly recently. I think I actually still have it pulled up somewhere. It was really interesting. And I was thinking about whether or not I should, you know, whether or not I have anything to contribute on that particular paper. Is it this paper? Yeah, it's this paper. It's called the Emergent Big Bang Scenario. And that was based on an earlier paper called From Configuration to Dynamics, which basically constructs a model where time is emergent from a timeless universe using something called a clock field, which is really interesting. From Chase Martin with the $5, motivation is short-lived. Only discipline can get you through tough times. Develop the discipline to do things you don't want to. Develop the discipline to do things you don't want to reach your goals. That's probably true. Yeah. That's probably good advice. Thanks, Chase. Have you ever refereed an article? Yeah, I have a whole folder of articles I've refereed. I turn them down pretty frequently because it takes a lot of time to do right, and I want to make sure that I want to make sure that I give them the credit that they deserve, and I want to make sure that I'm the right expert for it. And often I'm not, but I do it on the occasion, probably a few times a year. From Lift Labs with the $2, if you're a physic, what number am I thinking of? I'm you mean psychic. I'm not a psychic. I'm a physicist and a mathematician for what it's worth. But I appreciate the $2. You're probably thinking of the number like 7. What's your stance on AI in physics? I generally don't like AI. I think that it's a useful tool. We've already seen a paper published that where there's a genuine new result coming about via like ChatGPT or some advanced model like it. So I think it's a useful tool. I think that as it currently stands, it probably isn't going to do the kind of thing that, I should say, its current capabilities are not really capable of doing the kind of, you know, intuitive conceptual building that physicists do. At least theoretical physicists. Of course, they're not going to be replacing experimental physicists anytime soon, but they're not able to do that conceptual kind of model building that theoretical physicists do. But they're really helpful in two things that I've found. The first is figuring out if an idea that you have, some sort of concept or some sort of like kind of vague notion, is a bad idea from the get-go. Usually, if you have an idea and you want to try to figure out if you're going to write a paper about it, at least prior to a year or two ago, it would take a lot of work just to check if it even was going to like pass first muster, like if it was going to work at all. ChatGPT and LLMs like it is actually pretty good at showing you how some idea won't work. So that's nice. It's also really good at finding references for things that are not in your field of expertise. Now, of course, you have to use it like the advanced mode. I would never recommend I imagine that the free mode probably isn't very good for any of this, but I have a paid subscription. It's like $20 a month or something. That mode is really good at finding sources for things that I'm not familiar with, and then I can go look at them. Like if I need to learn something about, I don't know, like time symmetric mixed state quantum mechanics or something like this. This is something I don't know a lot about. I can be like, okay, give me the 3 canonical textbooks or review papers that will go over this topic, and then it'll spit them out very quickly. And otherwise, that's a hard thing for me to find. That'll be like, if you're not familiar with the literature of a specific area, it can be hard to find the canonical references. So that's really nice. So I think that those are probably its 2 greatest, its 2 best things right now. It's still not very good at doing calculations. You still have to double check all of them. Still not very good at coming up with new ideas, but it is good at checking when ideas are bad and providing you sources. I watched you get demolished by Caleb. I haven't spoken with Caleb in years. But if you're talking about like years ago, yeah, like he's been destroyed. From the Mad Cow with the $2, can you talk about F equals MC squared over H a bit? It's not a correct equation. Like you want to write is that the frequency is E over H. But that's only true for massless particles, right? That's only true for massless particles. And massless particles, their energy is not equal to MC squared. So the equation is just combining things in ways that they don't apply. How would entropy work in a model where time is defined for all R? Basically, if time is eternal in both directions. You can have a whole bunch of different ways that this could work. You could have that your entropy is just not well defined because it's infinite. Like you could have an infinitely large universe, in which case your entropy is infinitely large. And so there's just no well-defined entropy value that must increase. Essentially, you could treat it as if the entropy is increasing, but it's infinite the whole time. No issue with that. You can also have the entropy be asymptotically decreasing to 0 in the past, and just, you know, increasing away perhaps exponentially into the future. Like for example, your entropy could map onto e to the x, or e to the t rather. So as t goes to negative infinity, your time is as e goes to negative, or as t goes to negative infinity, your entropy decreases but never actually gets to 0. And as t goes to positive infinity, your entropy increases to infinity. In that case, your entropy is still always increasing. And finally, you don't necessarily need the entropy of the whole universe to follow the second law of thermodynamics. It's not even clear if entropy is like a well-defined notion for the universe. From Ekipo with the €2, thank you so much, Ekipo. Hi, Dr. Blitz. Are photonic molecules matter? I have no idea what a photonic molecule is. I don't know. So I can't answer your question, sorry. Has AI helped physicists, or does it lie? Yeah, I mean, there's a paper that was written recently. It made big news because the main result of the paper was derived by an AI model. As far as I know, it wasn't like a groundbreaking paper. It wasn't like something that no humans would ever come up with. It basically did pattern matching, which is kind of neat. But yeah, like AI is a useful tool, but we shouldn't treat it as like a magical oracle that we, you know, just always believe. Theoretically, does FTL mean traveling to the past? If yes, do all of the particles crossing event horizon loop back to the Big Bang? Sort of yes. If you could travel faster than light, that would in some sense mean that you can travel along space like geodesics. Traveling along space like geodesics means backwards time travel for at least one observer. But particles crossing the event horizon of a black hole don't travel faster than light. What's the difference between ideal mechanical advantage and mechanical advantage? I have no idea. That sounds like an engineering thing. and I just don't know the answer to it. From Pat Thesson from Pat Thesson with the $5. I sent you a super before your software caught it. Lol. I'm applying to grad school and I wondered what you did for a statement of purpose. They're so broad. Oh, do I still have mine? I wonder if I still have mine when applying to grad school. I don't think I still have mine, which I understand is not helpful. It has been so long. So for what it's worth, I started grad school in 2015. So it's been 11 years. So I don't remember, unfortunately. What I do remember is that I said things like I wanted to work with, I wanted to do cosmology research and quantum gravity research. Those are things that I mentioned that I wanted to do. I don't know how important the statement of purpose actually is. To be fair, one thing I did do is I did name drop some professors at the universities I was applying to. So the university I ended up going to, I name dropped a specific professor that I would like to work with in the area that he works on. So that's like a thing that maybe is worth doing, but I don't have any advice specifically for applying for statement of purposes like more generally. And from Sydney Raptor with the $2 Australian, is anti-gravity ever likely to be deployed? Not really. Anti-gravity is not really a thing that's possible kind of by definition. Now what you can do is you can create like other forms of levitation, like superconducting levitation, but this isn't anti-gravity. This is like you produce an electromagnetic force in the opposite direction that's stronger than the gravitational pull downward. But otherwise anti-gravity is not really a thing. There is no negative mass, which you would need for anti-gravity. Do you have any thoughts on the mechanics of a singularity? Can you fix the infinity problem? There probably are no singularities in my view. Why does tunneling limit the miniaturization of MOSFETs? So I made a video on MOSFETs a while ago, but the rough idea is in order to make a MOSFET work, you have to be able to have essentially a gap between the source and the drain that charge can't jump the gap. And so if you make the gap between the source and the drain smaller, then eventually electrons will be able to jump the gap because of quantum tunneling. From Mr. Pacho with the $20, just multiply your mass by -1, poof, anti-gravity, SMH this guy. True, you could just do that. If only we could figure out how to apply mathematical operations to physical objects. From Sans Sensibility with the $10, what is your favorite area of research going on right now, and has it changed as we've come to understand more about science? My favorite area of research is early universe cosmology, or alternatively, very late universe cosmology. I'm really curious about what's happening at the very end of the universe and about what happened in the very early universe. Because these seem like really important questions. And I think that up until recently, we've been very limited about the way that we think about them. And from J Explorer with the $5, any experiments coming up in the near future, 10-ish years, that would confirm, rule out particular cosmological models? What is your dream experiment? Yes, there is. LISA, which is the laser interferometry space antenna. I think I'm getting the acronym right. It's basically a giant gravitational wave detector in space, which is planned to launch in the mid-2030s. And when it does, we will hopefully detect things like primordial gravitational waves. We will hopefully detect things like gravitational waves from supermassive black hole mergers, and all of these kinds of things can tell us more about the kinds of cosmological models that will be correct. So that's probably the biggest thing to look forward to in my view. Yeah, if we make it that far. I'm really struggling in electricity as a 15-year-old, specifically on transformers and calculating resistance. Is there anything you could give me as a tip? People ask for tips a lot, and this isn't a problem with you. I know you're asking in good faith. People ask for tips a lot, like this is some, like there's just some trick to doing it. But there's never really any tricks in physics. I mean, there are sometimes calculational tricks, but those are like math things that you just kind of have to like be told about once in a very specific scenario. But it's more of just like you have to work the problems enough and see enough examples and see visualizations in different ways enough that you can develop the intuition so that the mathematics is no longer surprising. So a recent finding by JWST found out a typical young galaxy far, far away from ours as time is relative to us. So it has to be an older galaxy, but are on infrared vision. It has redshifts on them, meaning I have no idea what the question means. Do you think reality is fundamentally deterministic or probabilistic? I think at a base level, it's deterministic. I think that our branch of the universe is indistinguishable from being probabilistic. What are your thoughts on the nature of logic? Is it intrinsic to reality or maybe just our universe? I think logic is just a thing that humans do. Well, and like minds in general. What do you think is the most impactful recent discovery in physics? Well, I think from my perspective, and this is from my perspective, probably the discovery, if you will, of gravitational waves. So we can now measure gravitational waves from black hole collisions, and I think that probably has the most impact as far as our ability to do physics and understand the world around us. From Trent Trez with the $5, or Trent Rez, my brain hurts watching this and I don't understand a word of it. So obviously it's all bullshit. Checkmate, atheist. You got me. I've been had. Does it bother you when flat earthers discredit your education scholarly qualifications? Not so much. Do you play KSP? I played so much KSP in undergrad, and then I quit because I was playing it too much. But I think I locked in like 3,000 hours over the course of one summer. So, Dr. Blitz, why does general relativity become relevant at the Planck scale? So, at the Planck scale, this is where, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. I don't recognize the number, but I think it was spam. Right, so at the Planck scale, in order for something to exist and be confined within the Planck scale, like in order to localize an electron to the Planck scale, or in order to have a photon whose wavelength is shorter than the Planck scale, the energy required is sufficient and is so large, because localizing things to smaller and smaller volumes takes more and more energy, that the gravitational warping of space-time becomes relevant at that scale. You have so much energy concentrated in such a small area that you end up essentially forming a black hole. And so you have to take into account general relativity at the Planck scale, or at least some kind of quantum gravity. Blitz, how can lay people really get what modern physics is doing? Can pop sci books do it, or should we all just get a textbook? Good pop sci books can do it. At some point, maybe I'll put this, maybe I'll make a project for myself at some point, I don't know, in the coming year or something, where I will just start reading pop science books and evaluating how good they are at, you know, matching on to what's true. Maybe that's something that's worth doing. The thing is, most people who write pop science books are generally doing it in good faith. Like they're not trying to lie to you, they're not trying to oversimplify. But the thing is because of the way that these things can be written, the lay audience can often not understand the technically correct way that a person is describing something. So people might use language, a scientist or a science adjacent person might use the language to describe correct modern physics. But because of the way that the language is colloquially understood, it leads to an incorrect understanding based off of the layperson reading. So, you know, maybe it's worth doing. Is there a method to calculate object speed moving around a 4-dimensional space object? Yeah, sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, like, it's basically the exact same for 3-dimensional stuff. You like quantum or classical physics better? Honestly, I like classical physics better, but classical physics includes general relativity, so. Have you ever been able to change a flat earther's mind on your live shows? Probably not live, but I have made some flat earthers or some people who are globe skeptics think about things and say, huh, that's a good point, I'll have to think about that. And who knows if they ever ended up actually changing their mind, but that kind of thing does happen occasionally. Can you explain the concept of superposition to me? Yeah, superposition is not some scary quantum thing. It happens whenever there's waves present. So the best analogy that I've used in the past is, imagine that you have a guitar and you play 2 strings at once. The sound that's produced is now in superposition of the 2 sounds from each of the individual strings. Thoughts on OR? Do wave functions that collapse in microtubules in the brain produce awareness? Does gravity play a part? I don't really believe OR at all. I don't think that there's much to it. Are there any video games that could help train certain skills that are useful in physics? Kerbal Space Program is the best way to learn orbital mechanics, hands down. It's better than any textbook. $3,000 hours is 125 days. Okay, maybe it wasn't. So maybe it wasn't 3,000 hours in one summer, but I definitely remember that. Yeah, okay. No, you're right. That does seem unrealistic. I remember checking my Steam and seeing 3,000 hours at the end of summer. But maybe I played more during the school year than I thought. Would you be a technical advisor for a book if you were offered such? I mean, if it paid, yeah. If it paid enough that it was like worth my time, yeah. Because at this point, I'm so busy. I'm so busy with like personal stuff and creating content for you guys, and I still do research. I still write papers. I still have collaborations with people, and I'm working on new ideas. So it would need to be sufficiently worth my time. And skip down to the bottom. From Mike Angel with the $2, will we get UFO disclosure before GTA 6? I don't think that we'll get UFO disclosure. I don't think that we've been visited, to be honest. Have you played that chemistry game? No, I don't play chemistry. Or I don't really care for chemistry. So I don't even know what you're talking about. From Handsome Cat 2. Sorry, from Handsome Cat with the $2. Is a black hole a mass object or a point in space? A black hole is a region in space. It is a region surrounded by an event horizon. I don't think I'm following your string analogy for superpositions. You mean the sound has 2 origins? No, what I mean is that like there are 2 sound waves and then they're just added on top of each other. And the resulting sound wave is the sum. That's what a superposition is. It is the sum of 2 distinct sound waves. So each string produces its own sound wave. The sound waves are different, but because they're taking place in the same air, they have to add together to make a single sound wave. And that single sound wave is a superposition of the 2 sound waves, of the sound waves that would have been produced if each string was plucked individually. Why does orbiting a black hole really close to the event horizon doesn't speed you up closer to the speed of light? I mean, you have to orbit close to the speed of light. Well, it depends on how big your orbit is, but you have to orbit very quickly if you're orbiting in a black hole near its, like nearish to its event horizon. That's just true. From Ekipo with the $2, what's your favorite star? Mine is Betelgeuse, or Betelgeuse, or however you pronounce it. My favorite star, I don't know if I have one. I'm really quite fond of Sirius because it's really bright and you can always see it. I've lived in a city my whole life, so I rarely get to see the stars, many stars. I don't know if I have a favorite star. Do you take the theory of infinite universes seriously? It's a genuine possibility. Now, whether or not it's plausible is a different question, but it's something that we need to consider. Coins dropping? What? Is spooky action at a distance real, or is my wife trolling me? Spooky action at a distance is just what Einstein called the phenomenon of entanglement. And entanglement's real. My favorite theory is the hologram theory of black holes. What do you think of it? It has a lot of reach, but it's fun when I heard it. I'm not too convinced that our universe is actually holographic. So make of that what you will. From Fear's interaction with the $5, accepting biology without accepting evolution is like accepting trigonometry without accepting algebra. Is that a fair analogy? No. Accepting biology without accepting evolution would be like accepting calculus without accepting algebra. Because trigonometry isn't really based on algebra. Like trigonometry and algebra are kind of separate things, whereas the idea here is that that to accept biology, you should implicitly accept evolution because it's kind of required in order for biology to make sense. And so in order for calculus to make sense, you have to you have to like make sense of algebra. Algebra has to make sense. But it's a close analogy, so it's fine. That said, I would imagine most evolution deniers are not really that familiar with trigonometry. What concept of differential geometry is fundamental in describing gravity as the curvature of spacetime? It's a good question, and the answer is in the question. So when we talk about the curvature of something, that is a fundamentally differential geometric description. Curvature is, so differential geometry is the mathematics of describing the curvature of spaces, the curvature of things, right? That's what differential geometry is about. There's other stuff that's involved too, but when we talk about the curvature, this is a tensorial concept that shows up on a pseudo-Riemannian manifold, and that is the language of differential geometry, or that's the setting of differential geometry, or at least part of it. How small do you think our universe is compared to reality? I take the word universe to just mean all of physical reality. So I would say that it's not small compared to reality. What do you think of Sean Carroll's books Space, Time and Motion and Quantum Fields as books that are in between pop sci and actual textbooks? I read the first one. I haven't read the second one yet. The first one was very good. I thought it was excellent. I also am a Sean Carroll stan, so you know, I may be biased. Let me drink some water really quick. Gotta stay hydrated. And make sure I didn't miss any cash apps either. Who called me? Oh, that was spam. Okay. Not worried about that. Where did you study and what do you have a PhD in? I'm not telling you where I studied, at least not yet, and I have a PhD in physics. I try to keep my academic stuff kind of separate from my online persona just because some people on the internet can be very cruel. As evidenced by the fact that I have a stalker who, you know, is really creepy. What's your favorite Metallica song? There's some obvious ones like Master of Puppets, but I really like Jump in the Fire. I really like For Whom the Bell Tolls. Yeah, maybe those are... Oh, there's one other song that I really like that... I can't remember the name of. God, it's been so long since I've listened to Metallica. From Germs Rossalina with the $20. Thank you so much, Germs. Do you have book recommendations for string theory and or other topics you've brought up on here? Offhand, I can think of B theory, multi-worlds, etc. I have an engineering degree, so I have some physics, but not master's PhD level. So these are completely unrelated things. String theory, a textbook is going to be probably above your pay grade if you have an engineering degree and you haven't taken like quantum field theory. String theory will not make sense to you. From a string theory textbook. The place I learned string theory was from David Tong's notes, which are famously very, very good. They're online for free. But again, you will need quantum field theory to make sense of them and relativity. As far as B theory is concerned, you could probably just read the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on like theories of time, and B theory will pop up, and that should be probably pretty readable. The Many Worlds, I would recommend you read Something Deeply Hidden by Jean Carroll. It's a very, very good book and a good introduction to quantum mechanics and many worlds. So those would be my recommendations. And $20 from Kelly Share. Thank you so much. You guys are being so generous today. Dr. Blitz, do you think it is possible that the humans split in two different groups, which developed into two radically different groups? One of these groups may be the UFO, and the other is the Earth Dwellers. No, I don't think that's really possible. Because what that would mean is that we would have one of these groups that like was sufficiently advanced in technology that they could leave the Earth. And we just don't see any evidence of that having happened anthropologically. Right. Do you think the universe might be a multidimensional cellular automaton? Not really, no. Skip down to the bottom. Nothing Else Matters is also really good. I don't know if it's in my top 3 though. I don't quite get the idea of geometry being emergent from quantum entanglement. Have you heard of it? Yeah. So the way that I think about it is that I kind of think of it in the reverse way. Namely that we think of distances as being things that exist, but that notion of distance perhaps is only there when your systems are not entangled. And the reason why I say this is because quantumly entangled objects behave as if they're just a single object, not like spatially separated distinct objects. They behave as if they're like a single thing. And so that would suggest that in some sense, lack of entanglement is what gives rise to spatial separation, this kind of like classical notion of spatial separation. And so that's at least one way to think about it. There are other ways, holographically, where you can talk about entanglement entropy of a boundary giving rise to spatial distances in the interior of a bulk manifold. This is the ADS-CFT correspondence, in particular the Ryu-Takeyanagi formula. But I think that there's probably less intuition for why that happens, at least in my view. Chase Martin sends $5 to also give a good suggestion for string theory. So a first course in string theory by Barton Zweibach is undergrad accessible, written for an undergrad string theory course he taught at MIT. Good start. That's good to know. I haven't read it, so I can't comment. But, you know, by the way, Chase is a string theorist. So Chase would absolutely be the person to talk to with regards to learning string theory. I'm not a string theorist. From Bookie the Cat with the $2, when is the collab with Dr. Terrence Howard, PhD? Oh, you know, that he's brilliant. I can never venture to hope that he would ever deign to collaborate with me. From Gretchen with the $3.11, One was the first Metallica song I really loved. One is also excellent. And the music video is really, really good. However, my view is like it's very chuggy for me. Like, it's probably too chuggy for me. And from Jinxed with the £5, when Penrose talks about quantum consciousness, is he onto something? Because if he is, decades of consciousness psych research might have a problem. I don't think that he's onto something, no. I don't think so. You think we'll have something better than Lambda CDM in our lifetime? I do. I do think so, yeah. Either that or we will have even more evidence for Lambda CDM. And by the way, I actually don't think it'll be I'm not sure if it'll be the CDM part that's resolved. I think it's the Lambda part that'll change. Does the expansion of the universe suggest an objective arrow of time? I.e., if the space-time fabric is expanding, then isn't new time being created continually vis-a-vis A theory? So space-time isn't expanding, space is expanding. But yes, this does give you an well, it doesn't give you an objective arrow of time. It gives you an objective kind of direction of time, meaning that there is like a path through which you can follow the expansion in like the cleanest way possible. But it doesn't tell you that like the past is, or it doesn't tell you that smaller is the past and bigger is the future. That doesn't come about from the expansion of the universe. You don't get that for free. What do you think of the amplituhedron by Nima Arkani Hamed? I know almost nothing about it. I met him once. I've worked with one of his students, who also is one of the founders of the amplituhedron. But I know like nothing about it. It's very complicated. And it's very quantum field theory stuff, which I just don't do a lot of. What if all the extra dimensions in string theory explain quantum entanglement in such a way that there actually is no separation and everything and everywhere is all the same thing, so entanglement. So extra dimensions just make things further apart from each other. It can't make things closer. What does it mean for space to expand if space has no edge? So I've made a few videos on this topic because it is a common question. But what we're talking about is something like of a local phenomenon. We're not talking about like the edges are just getting further away. What we're talking about is a given region of space. The stuff in it is getting further away from everything else in that given region of space. And that's happening everywhere. We have no evidence that space is expanding. The distance between objects is, though. Well, yeah, those two things are equivalent. Dr. Blitz, you recently talked about a paper hinting that the universe's expansion is slowing down. Has there been an update? I haven't seen any updates on it. I probably should look into it. I know that, so Adam Rees is one of the most famous people with regards to supernova analysis, supernova, like cosmic distance ladder analysis. He's one of the people that won the Nobel Prize for proving the acceleration of the universe, or the expansion of the universe is accelerating. And he has made the statement that that conclusion is wrong. And he is like the world's expert on this. So it could be that the paper was just doing a bad analysis or was taking into account something that had already been taken into account. So maybe they were counting it twice, whatever it might be. I haven't followed up on it, but I should. And that seems like an interesting thing for me to do. Maybe I'll do it this afternoon. Is it just me, or is chemistry just a type of physics? Everything is positive and negative charges. Everything is just electromagnetism. Yeah, chemistry is the emergent science that comes from quantum mechanics and electromagnetism playing together. That's what chemistry is. But that doesn't mean it's not a separate science. Is there a physics theory that makes sense to you on paper, but that you still can't wrap your head around conceptually? No, generally, if something makes sense to me if I can't wrap my head around something conceptually, generally, I will not think that it's like, it won't make sense to me on paper either. What university provides the best physics? It's going to be the typical answers. Probably Princeton is one of the best. MIT is one of the best. Cambridge, probably one of the best. Harvard, Yale. University of Chicago, surprisingly, perhaps. Very, very good for specific kinds of physics. That's because Wald is there. Do you think string theory will eventually die off, or do you think it'll still be a popular theory? I don't think it'll die off, really. Well, okay, I mean, maybe in like 200 years or something, but I don't think it's going to die off anytime in the near future. What's the best pathway to get a good understanding of solid state physics? If I knew the answer, I would do it. I don't have a good understanding of solid state physics, because I just... Admittedly, I just don't really care for it. So I know that's not helpful. When black holes collide, does that produce a singularity in time and space? It's not clear that black holes have singularities. That's the real answer. That is the real answer. Efont, I appreciate the kind words, but I'm not reading anything about my health. From Ron Goldman with the $5, if Higgs boson false vacuum collapses in a region of space, does that happen everywhere simultaneously, or does it expand like a bubble? It would happen locally and then expand. Is IceCube Observatory confronting modern physics with anomalies that, like the Michelson-Morley experiment before relativity, hint at a deeper conceptual revolution waiting to happen? Not yet. There's no like definitive this is a problem, but there are some strange things that don't have full explanations yet, but they could just be flukes. From Chase Martin with $5, I can give an in-depth answer on the future of string theory, but it is a long discussion. Yeah, I would imagine so. You should make a video about it if you haven't already. And then I can tell people to go watch it. Is positive charge an absence of electrons basically besides the charge that protons create? Well, no, I mean, you said it there. So like some things have positive charges and some things have negative charges. The things that have positive charges are not just things without electrons. There are things that have their own positive charges just by being themselves. He missed a super chat? No, I deleted a super chat because I explicitly said in my Discord server that I will not be addressing certain things. Admins, why are you not stating that simple? What? Is water technically equivalent to lava? If you ask Hank Green, the answer is yes, and I believe it. Do you think human civilization will ever reach eternal life, or such a thing already exists? I suspect not. How would you best describe the folding of space on itself, and where do you see the exit being? Space, it doesn't really make sense to say that space folds on itself. That's like a metaphor that's used, but it's not like a real thing that happens. I revealed the community gift. Oh, I don't know how. One sec, sorry. There's a thing that I'm supposed to do. Do I go to settings? No. Do I go here? No. Do I go viewer wishes? No. I don't know how to do this. There's this thing called community gift, and I don't know what that is or how to do it from the app on the computer. Maybe if I click here? Sorry, one sec, guys. All new creator camp. That. I don't know what any of this is. I don't know how to reveal the community, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how to do this. Okay, I give up. I will worry about it. I'll worry about it later. Sorry, y'all. Anyway, let's go back to answering questions. From Ekipo with the two euros, would you join a hive mind? Maybe. Do neutrinos remove gravitational energy by transferring mass? So yeah, in some sense. In the Newtonian worldview, things that are far away from gravitational sources have more gravitational potential energy, and as they fall, their gravitational potential energy gets converted to kinetic energy. And if, as they're falling, they heat up, and then they emit stuff, that kinetic energy can be converted into, other things like neutrinos. Can an average guy with an average IQ become a physicist? Please answer. I mean, it sure seems possible. That said, it seems unlikely. Or not unlikely, it seems tricky, because if you look at the average IQ of a physics person who graduated with a physics degree, I think it's like 120 or something, which is just above average, right? So it's just going to be trickier, if only because it's going to be trickier as average because you will be below what the average is, right? Okay, so video GIFs. I'm being given instructions on how to do this. So TikTok Studio. And then I go to video GIFs. Video gifts. Yeah, it's enabled. Yeah, it's enabled. Okay. And by the way, Grimlock sent $50 for hydration and stay safe. I will do my best. Thank you so much, Grimlock. From Chase Welsh with the $5, if we found a complete unified theory, what would it actually explain that the standard model and general relativity don't? It's a good question. So at the surface level, it would explain a few things that are just like obviously unresolved. It would probably, or it would necessarily explain to us what dark energy is, what dark matter is. It would also explain to us what like how gravity works at the quantum scale, which we currently don't understand. It would, I suspect it would explain to us what's going on inside a black hole, what was happening near the Big Bang, these kinds of things. But more deeply, it would explain, I would hope, it would explain to us questions about like what time is, or why the constants of the universe are the way they are. I would hope that it would explain those things too. Yeah, also, yeah, Jorge, it should have fewer free parameters, that's true. How did you rank in your physics cohort before your PhD studies? So the school I went to, as far as I know, this is like an undergrad, I don't think that they had ranking, but compared to the people I was taking classes with, I was almost certainly at the top of the class or second in my class. It's hard to say. Just not to toot my own horn, but this is a fun story that I get to brag about. When my physics cohort was taking quantum mechanics, a first course in quantum mechanics, this was sophomore year, freshman year, or this was first semester sophomore year. The first midterm rolled around, and the average on the exam was a 26 or 27%. I don't remember which one. I scored a 93 on that exam. And I scored the highest on that exam. So if that is anything to, if that gives any indication, I was definitely at the top of my class, or there may have been one other person who did better in all of our classes together. His name was Brett. He was a very kind guy. He did better on the PGRE than I did. He got into better grad schools than I did. So, you know, he may have been higher ranked than I am if there was a rank. From C-Bar with the $5, this is a thank you for answering my question. Well, you're welcome. I appreciate that. No, it wasn't Brett Weinstein. No. No, I didn't get a 100% on my quantum mechanics exam. That's true. On my first quantum mechanics exam. I sensed some resentment of Brett. No, so Brett was a very, very good student. He was probably a good example of like what you think. And by the way, he was a super nice guy. He was never he and I wouldn't say that we were like friends because we didn't hang out much, but we were definitely friendly. We were acquaintances. But he was probably what you would think of as like the quintessential perfect student. Like he was definitely some guy, like the kind of guy that definitely spent time studying. He was definitely the kind of guy who managed his time well, and you know, did a bunch of extracurriculars, and was networking and all. He was what you would think of as the perfect student. I was just like a nerdy kid. I didn't really study much. I probably prioritized things I shouldn't have prioritized. I was just good at physics. And so this is to say that I wouldn't be surprised if he did better than me overall, as far as like GPA goes, or like averages or whatever, or as far as rank goes. But if he did, he deserved it, right? Like that's just true, because he definitely put in more effort than I did. Wow, you took quantum mechanics in freshman year? What did you take in your senior year? No. Quantum mechanics was, sorry, second semester sophomore year. Is there current research to resolve the problems with using the Schrodinger equation to calculate molecules with more than 10 atoms? Yeah, these involve like numerical quantum mechanics, which is hard to do. What happens to the energy that's lost because of the universe's expansion? Isn't it basically disappearing? Yeah, it is basically disappearing. Right? From Ron Goldman with the $5, why can't gravity just be an effect of the Higgs boson? what isn't satisfied by this explanation? Why does it need its own particle in the standard model? Well, the Higgs boson doesn't, the Higgs boson just gives things effective mass. Things have energy regardless of whether or not they have mass. And if they have energy, then they have gravity. So the Higgs boson can't be the contributing factor, can't be the thing that gives gravity, because it just makes things have mass that already had energy, right? The energy isn't lost, it's more dispersed within the system. No, it actually is lost. So energy is not conserved in an expanding universe. Do you plan on going on Parker's stream again? If he invites me up. Parker doesn't really do topics that I do that I do really anymore. So, you know, while we're still mutuals and I still consider him, you know, a casual friend, we just don't have, there's just not a lot of overlap between what we do these days. I watch Parker on the regular. I actually, and don't hate me for this, Dean, if you're watching, don't hate me for this. I like watching Parker more than I like watching Dean. I think it's just the way that, I don't know. I know Dean is more popular, but, and I like Dean just fine. I think that he probably is doing I think that he's like doing a good thing for the world, but you know, I just enjoy the live streams more from Parker. Wait, energy is being lost in the universe? Well, yeah, so during cosmological redshift, photons just lose energy, and that energy isn't going anywhere. That said, on the net, our universe is gaining energy in some sense because of the expansion of space that comes from the increase in dark energy of the universe. Do you have a way for a layman to visualize infinity? Hilbert's hotel paradox gives us a hotel which has simultaneously an infinite number of guests and an infinite number of vacancies. Frustrating. Yeah, that's the real world. No, there's not a good way to visualize infinity in my view. Even if we accept the Big Bang, what caused the laws of physics themselves? Good question. Maybe they don't have causes. Maybe these are not the kinds of things that need causes. Maybe they're not things that exist. Maybe they're not things at all. How do you prevent brain damage while debating flat earthers? I sometimes facepalm so violently I almost pass out. Oh, well, you just gotta have the restraint, right? Parker and Dean are both liberals. Once they get older and become left and progressive, I will like them. They're still both very pro-capitalism, which is very short-sighted. So Parker used to be a socialist. Then he got a degree in economics, and now he's a liberal, which, you know, I think that he may have done that. I don't know if that was a cynical move. I actually think that, like, he and I, a long time ago, maybe 2 years ago, I actually came up on, like, back when he was doing economics debates, he and I actually did a debate on, like, I came up as opposition to debate him on, you know, capitalism versus socialism. And he defended capitalism. And, like, he brings up some good points. I tend to be more of a moderate as far as socialists are concerned. I'm not in favor of command economies. I think that markets can be fairly useful for efficiency's sake, but I just don't think that they're a solution generally, and I don't think that they're necessarily the best for humans flourishing, but that's a whole separate question. But I think, I don't know if Parker will ever become more socialist leaning. They are definitely both progressives, though. You can be a pro-capitalist and also be a progressive. These are not indistinguishable. These are not you know, mutually exclusive. The existence of universal consistent laws of physics that govern the cosmos points to an underlying rational order. You might be putting the cart before the horse. Who's your favorite science communicator? It's got to be either Sean Carroll or Matthew O'Dowd. From C-Bar with the $5, Dr. Blitz is the gassy star at the center of the Parkerverse. What does that mean? What does that mean? Is a Mobius strip a poor representation of infinity? There's nothing infinite about a Mobius strip. When the universe expands, what kind of energy does it create? There's just more dark energy. Is infinity plus 1 ontologically different from infinity? I don't know what you mean by ontologically. Infinity isn't a number. So like it's hard to talk about what you mean by infinity plus 1. How do I argue against flat Earth, no curve argument? I have found this difficult. Just ask them how sunsets work. And then when they tell you that the sun just gets far away, explain to them that things that get far away get smaller and dimmer. And the sun doesn't do that. The sun doesn't shrink off to a point. It just dips below the horizon. Could flat Earth discussions be a good method to teach people about critical thinking, Occams, etc.? Yeah, I think so. Have any flat earthers brought up any genuinely good points, or are they all just nonsensical? Most of them are nonsensical, yeah. I can't think of any off the top of my head. You can't be a socialist and not in favor of command economies? Well, so to be clear, I mean like global command economies. I think that there are some things that are probably better to have a command economy for, like some industries. Like I would think that like healthcare is probably better to have at least some degree of top-down oversight for healthcare. Similarly for other needs like infrastructure, housing, food, water, these kinds of things. So have you ever thought about collabing with Mezzo and Joel? So Mezzo and Joel are in the deconstruction community, and they're very, very good at what they do. I never deconstructed. There was never a deconstruction process for me. I was never a Christian. So I find a lot of the stuff that they do just like interminably boring, and not because of like they're boring or they're bad at their jobs. They're very good at their jobs. They're very good at what they do. I just have no connection to any of the stuff that they're talking about. Like it's just dull to me. Now, would I collab with them? Absolutely. But like I just don't watch them on the regular because, like I find and I love the guy. I love Justin. But the endless topics about the Bible itself, about XYZ, this verb means this in this context in this prophecy and written by this guy at this, like, it gets so old for me. Just because like I was never a believer in that stuff, so it's really hard for me to be interested in like dissecting it. From Brenda Creates with $5. In your socialist economy, would I be allowed to start a business? Sure. I don't have an issue with people doing what they want to do and, selling their labor, selling their ability to make stuff happen. It's complicated. My issue is that like people shouldn't enter contracts when there is an obvious imbalance in power. That's my issue. If the universe is expanding or has an edge, then there must be something outside. You have zero idea what's outside the universe unless informed by, for example, a god. If the universe expanding doesn't mean that there must be an outside. No, that doesn't follow. Do you think singularities are a sign that our current theories, possibly even foundations, are unstable, potentially broken in some way? Well, yeah, I would say it means that our current theories are broken in some way, and the same way that classical electromagnetism was broken because of this, not because of, but was broken and was fixed by quantum electrodynamics. Quantum electrodynamics does away with the singularities that are present in Maxwell's equations. Is the Hairy Ball theorem any useful? Yes, very much so. That's not socialism then? Then you don't know what socialism is. Then you're a capitalist. People seem to not know what capitalism or socialism is. They're not a socialist. Socialist doesn't mean you can't start a business. I think that you're confused about what socialism is. Starting a business doesn't mean that... Look, socialism is when the workers own the means of production. If you start a business and you're the worker, then you by definition own the means of production, right? If everybody owned their own business, that would be socialism. How did the Jews know there was a hexagram on Saturn 3,000 years before NASA discovered it? First of all, I don't like that people refer to the Jews. That makes me a little uncomfortable. Also, I don't think that's true, but I'd love to hear your take on that. I haven't seen that claim defended anywhere. Can dark energy be used in any way? How is it gaining energy if it's expanding the universe? The reason why it's expanding the universe is in part because it's gaining energy. It's a little bit confusing, but because its energy density is supposed to be constant, at least if it's a cosmological constant it is, then that means that the energy in the universe expands, gets bigger as the universe expands. And it's because that energy density is constant, which gives it a particular kind of equation of state that causes the pressure that makes the expansion happen. From Gretchen with the $5, you'd have a great time discussing Joel's wet box, his version of hot dense state with Joel and Mezzo. I'd pay good money to see that call him out. I should. I don't know. I feel like we just don't have a lot of overlap in what we talk about. And I only have so much time for so many creators. You may have noticed that like Unapologetic has been struggling to find opposition lately. I think like a lot of like us like OG debate people, except Dean and Parker, of course, they will never struggle because they're the biggest political ones in the space. But the OG kind of like philosophy or religion or science debate types have been really struggling to find opposition because there's so many people now. So many people are entering the space, and that's not a bad thing per se, but it does dilute the space. And you know, I can only follow so many. I can only follow and pay attention to and listen to, you know, the debate lives or the live streams of so many people. I only have time for so many. So. I do know what socialism is, and yes, it means the state controls the means of production. It doesn't mean that. But okay. Look, if that's what you think all socialists mean when they say that they're socialists, then you're mistaken. If you're using a definition of socialism that some socialists use, but not all socialists use, then you're just not being very specific. Jews, blacks is dehumanizing language. Stop. I agree. Yeah, so Jewish people can use the word Jews. I don't have a problem with that. I use it on the regular. But it always comes off weird when people talk about the Jews, especially if you're not Jewish. Why does the universe obey consistent, intelligible mathematical laws at all, and why is the human mind capable of discovering them? Well, I'm not sure if it does obey them. I don't think that the laws of physics are things that are obeyed. I think that they are descriptions of the way the universe is. That would mean mass is created? Not necessarily, no. Is it normal to talk to yourself in voices from movies when you're on the toilet? I don't know. Ask a psychologist. Many countries in Europe, okay, this is unrelated. Compared to a mathematician, do physicists give a lot of math? Yes. Yes, a lot, but not as much as mathematicians, obviously, but still a lot more than any other field. Is the concept of counterintuitive a hindrance for modern physics? Do you know any physicists whose mind works differently? I don't know any personally. I don't think it's a hindrance. Things are counterintuitive when you haven't worked with them a lot. And then they become less counterintuitive the more you work with them. How can there not be something outside the edge of the universe? Inside opposite is outside? As far as we can tell, there's no edge of the universe. You like Mike Brigandi's lives? I like never watched them. As a physicist, how does the lava lamp work? It's really complicated. What do you think of the idea that space looks dark because the gravity past the observable points of the universe being so high it acts like a black hole by preventing the light from reaching us? That's not the explanation for why space is dark. Space is dark because the universe has only had stars for a finite amount of time, and the universe is expanding, and the speed of light is finite. Why did you stop taking mRNA vaccines? I haven't like principally stopped taking them. I just haven't I haven't gotten the COVID vaccine because I don't know, I just never got around to it this past winter, I guess. Where does the energy of magnets come from if energy is never lost or created? Magnets, like, I'm not sure what energy of magnets you're referring to, but like you could ask the same thing about like where does the energy of gravity come from? Well, it's just a thing. Like if you have a big bunch of mass, then there's a potential energy associated with that mass. That's this potential energy field. Anything that enters that field will, or anything that is interacting with that field is going to have potential energy associated with the field. The same is true for a magnet. Anytime you have a certain number of spins aligned in a permanent magnet, it has a electric or a magnetic potential field. And anything interacting with that potential field will experience forces accordingly. In one live, you read Hebrew text from the Bible. Why do you know Hebrew? I went to a Jewish school for 6 years. Nothing wrong with saying the Jews or the blacks. That kind of controlling language is what makes racism a thing. No, there is something wrong about that because it's dehumanizing, right? How do astrophysicists account for factors of distortion or modulation, diffraction, refraction, etc. from asteroid belts and dust particles and different sources of gravity poles, if any? They, like, you want specific details? I'm not an astrophysicist. I don't know the specific details. All I know is that they put in a lot of effort to do so. If you go look at a serious astrophysics paper that is like doing an analysis, like a precision analysis of some particular thing, it will be quite long, and they will go over all of the details of how they're, you know, accounting for all of these different effects. What's wrong referring to the Jewish community using that name? Because we don't like it. We don't like when outsiders do it. So please don't. Have you heard of the physicist John Lennox? He's not a physicist, he's a mathematician. Let's jump down to the bottom, I'm a bit behind. Is F equals MA actually accurate? Yes, at a classical level, absolutely. Do you believe in God, and how has your profession helped shape your answer? I don't believe in God, and it's not really related. Are there any astrophysicist YouTubers that you know of? Yes, Dr. Becky Smethurst? Dr. Becky on YouTube. It's excellent. She's excellent. You're a Jewish guy who doesn't believe in God? Yup, it's more common than you'd think. You don't have to believe in God to be Jewish, actually. You don't even have to believe in God to be a rabbi. Is it the part of the phrase that makes it seem rude? It's just the whole thing. You're not a you. You spelled it wrong. None of them looked like you in biblical times. Well, it's really hard to say what people looked like, but like if you go look at like Lebanese people, or if you go look at Palestinians, a lot of them look Mediterranean, which is how I look, right? I look Mediterranean. I have curly hair, big nose. Now I am pretty fair-skinned, but like I went to school with plenty of people who have the same kind of ancestry that I have, and they were much darker. I just don't spend a lot of time outside. From Fatesify with the $5. You've said before you don't think any of our current theories of quantum gravity is correct. What do you think the correct one would lean towards in terms of GR? I don't know what you mean by in terms of GR. I'm just a little bit skeptical that any of them are currently correct because we don't really have any data to kind of like grab onto. And so we're kind of, and that coupled with this idea that it seems like all of the ideas that have been presented all seem to have flaws in their own way, that I'm a little bit skeptical, but I'm happy to be wrong about this. From Germs Rossalina with the $5, you mentioned a paper you wrote on why we don't live in a black hole. No, I haven't written it. It's a paper that I've been working on, I've been thinking about. It's not published anywhere. It's not done. You did a video on how ethical F equals MA is consistent with FE's path in the formulation, didn't you? What? Friedman, do you mean Friedman equations path in the formulation? Or what's FE standing for here? Feynman's path? I did, yeah, if you're referring to the Feynman path integral, yeah, I did do a video a while ago on how you get essentially classical physics out from the kind of average position of the Feynman path integral. Yeah, that's true. So your bloodline is Jewish? I'm confused. What is Jewish? Jewish is a people. It's like saying, look, and I'll say this once just to clarify. It's being like the Jewish community is like, it's an extended tribe or people group. So think like being Navajo, right? If you're Navajo, you don't have to believe in like the Navajo traditional, I don't want to say religion, but like spirituality. You don't have to believe in that to be Navajo. You're Navajo because your parents were Navajo. You're Navajo because you participate in the community, right? That's all, like that's what makes you Navajo, right? So if you also believe in like the religious tradition, great. But that's not a requirement. Hopefully that clarifies. Can you explain the difference between emergent and fundamental force in the emergent gravity theory? The emergent gravity theory is not that popular these days. The emergent gravity theory is mainly that it's like an entropic thing, right? Or it's potentially emergent from like entanglement. These are ideas that emergent gravity is like a statistical result of more fundamental underlying stuff. On the other hand, a fundamental force is just, you know, there's some, it is not that, I guess. There is some law, some fundamental law of physics that's at the bottom includes that force. Would you attribute the reason a physicist believes the evidence proves God versus the opposite? What would you attribute the reason a physicist believes the evidence proves God versus the opposite? Oh, I don't know. Probably because of priors. Probably because of intrinsic bias from when they were youth. Jewish isn't an ethnicity though, surely. It's part of it is an ethnicity, yeah. It's generally regarded as an ethno-religion. But like probably the correct term is like tribe or people group. Can you convert to Navajo? You can be welcomed into the tribe. You can be brought in, yeah. Except being Navajo is based on DNA, whereas Jewish isn't. Navajo isn't based on like tribal association is not. They don't use blood quantum. You guys seem really confused about that. Like this whole blood quantum stuff, that's like very Western. That's like a very Western idea, and it's very like white supremacist too. Do you believe in Newtonian determinism? If we know the laws of physics and nature, we can calculate everything? No, not really. Not really. Would a wave function collapse with an animal observation? It would collapse, like if the wave function collapse stuff is real, which I don't think that it is, it would collapse with just like a computer observation. It doesn't require a consciousness. And don't call me Shirley. Indeed, don't call me Shirley. How does a larger event horizon on a more massive black hole jive with the mathematical singularity with infinite density? Well, there might not be a mathematical singularity anywhere in a black hole. Like, I actually don't think that there are singularities, period. But the event horizon just tells you the point beyond which you cannot escape. So like if you have a more massive black hole, of course your larger event horizon is going to be bigger because you'll have, you know, more mass below you. And so that more mass below you will pull you harder the further out, or even at a further distance. Bertrand Russell's book Principia Mathematica used hundreds of pages to prove 1 + 1 = 2. Your opinion on that? It was a neat effort. Dr. Blitz, could you explain the principle of least action? Why does the universe care about it? I don't know if the universe does care about it. This seems like a mathematical formulation that we've come up with to try to kind of unify and make nice our laws of physics. You can have Jewish DNA, actually. Yeah, sure, you can. But having specific DNA is not what makes you Jewish, right? Like that's not required. Not like blood quantum stuff. Do physicists groan when someone brings up Schrodinger's cat? Well, if it's a lay person, yeah, often. That happens on the regular. We have a lot of people who just don't understand what Jewish people are in the comments. It's fine. They can go read if they want to learn. Otherwise, they can remain ignorant. Are fields or particles more fundamental? I think it's probably fields. What happened to that sound that was created in the 1980s that made a big fuss, and what language was used? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand the reference. All right, let's skip down to the bottom. Oh, you're referring to the wow signal. The wow signal, that was just it's actually, there is a potential explanation now. The wow signal merely is that it was essentially like an astrophysical laser that just popped off at just the right time in the right angle, or in the right at the right time. You're spewing misinformation about Jewish genealogy, though. You said it was an ethnicity, which would mean to be Jewish means you'd need to be Ashkenazi or similar descent. Most Israelis are not. No. So I didn't say that it was purely an ethnicity. Being an ethnicity doesn't mean anything about descent. Ethnicity and genealogy are not intrinsically related. The Jewish ethnicities are not merely Ashkenazi. There are other Jewish ethnicities as well. These would be like subtypes of the Jewish ethnicity, right? Because they all share certain ethnic traits in common. Most Israelis are not most Jewish people, or rather, Israelis make up like half the Jewish people, or perhaps slightly less the Jewish people. You're just very confused, and I would suggest that you stop spreading misinformation yourself, Laku. Don't talk for us if you're not. If you are not one of us, please don't talk for us. Was Tesla a fraud? He wasn't a fraud. He was just confused about a lot of things, right? Are you from a family of academics? Were you a genius child? I'm not from a family of academics. My mother's a medical doctor, but not like an academic doctor, if that makes sense. Were you a genius child? I don't know. At some point, I think I got my IQ tested, but I was never told what the result was. From Alex Hoffman with the $5. In light of relativity, do either of these statements ring true? Time doesn't exist, or time is an illusion. In light of relativity, both of those things are false. In light of quantum gravity, perhaps, one of those things might be true. A what laser? An astrophysical laser. Basically, like a laser in space that formed naturally, which is really cool, by the way. Skip down to the bottom so I don't lose my place. Physics is a mess now. Newton mechanics makes sense and has actual evidence, aka the level of if you think that physics is a mess now, then you just haven't looked at the evidence, I guess, which you should do. It would probably be helpful for you. Tesla wasn't confused. No one could understand him. There's a difference. No, he was definitely confused. He was confused about what relativity was. He was confused about mathematics. He was confused about nuclear power. In fact, he is quoted as saying there will never be a nuclear, did he say there will never be a nuclear bomb or there will never be nuclear power? In either case, he was wrong because he didn't think that like nuclear physics was real. He was very confused. Can you make sense of time being emergent? It makes no sense to me. I can, but it's very, very weird. So roughly the idea is that you can have like an actually static universe, but you can have a field that varies from place to place, and your relation to that field would make the laws of physics that you obey look a lot like there was time. To someone trying to get to grips with tensor calculus for GRQFT, do you have any tips? Pick up Sean Carroll's book, Space, Time, and Geometry. That's where I learned it, and it was pretty intuitive. I got some pretty good intuition for that. Thanks for the closure on the accent. He doesn't sound American. I am American. I was born in the United States. I lived in the United States my whole life. Well, I lived in Europe for 3 years. I moved back like 8 months ago, but yeah, I've American born and bred. A weird statement about the accent. I've never been accused of not being American. Oh yeah, it does sound cool. What kind of things make these astrophysical lasers? So I made a video on this a while ago. I don't remember what exactly it was, but I think it was a hydrogen cloud that had some iron in it. Some iron ions. If the universe is constantly expanding, will it ever start shrinking? We don't know. Maybe. Nicola fanboys in the chat losing their shit. Absolutely. Nicola fanboys are like the easiest to trigger. Dr. Blitz, I wanted to know if quantum field theory is relevant on macroscopic scale. Quantum field theory, maybe not, but quantum mechanics is definitely becoming more and more relevant at the macroscopic scale as time goes on. Do you think artificial collapsing of gravity could ever be possible? I suspect not. But, you know, I'd be happy to be wrong. Heat death of the universe. Will large objects such as planets still exist, or would they have broken apart long before? Would collisions still happen and transfer energy? It depends. We kind of expect that a lot of these objects that are localized, that were localized within galaxies, would eventually collapse and fall into the black hole at the center of these galaxies. So then they would cease to exist. But if you have like lone rogue planets, they would last much longer until they eventually either decay via proton decay or they quantum tunnel to become a black hole. Did you work in research at any time? I still do. I got a 3 letters back from referees in the last 2 weeks. One was a tentative acceptance, but I have to fix one thing. And so I'm fixing that, and then I fixed it, and now there's another thing I have to fix, and so hopefully this is the last referee report that needs to be accepted. And that's going to be published in the Proceedings of the American Mathematical Society, which is a really good journal. So that's cool. Another paper got desk rejected after 3 months, which sucks. It got rejected from communications in communications in mathematical physics. And then a third paper, I haven't looked at the referee report. I got it yesterday, and I've had other things on my mind since then. So yeah, I'm still regularly publishing. Let's skip down to the bottom because I'm a bit behind. What's your opinion on the state of modern day high education? I am very worried about it. Let's just leave it at that. If energy is not conserved, doesn't it follow that momentum is not conserved globally? There is a globally conserved momentum. It's just not the kind of momentum that you would like it to be. It would be like co-moving momentum. Co-moving momentum is conserved so long as the universe is isotropic and homogeneous. What's your opinion on gravitationally induced wave function collapse? I feel like it seems like a pretty intuitive theory for how that we get from the quantum scale to the classical. I'm not convinced, but I'd be happy to be wrong about it. Some new studies suggest the universe's expansion might be slowing down. What do you think? I've made videos about these, so if you want to see what I think, go watch them. My view is tentative excitement. You give science a bad name. Oh, that hurts my feelings. I'm so hurt. Ah, God, I'm getting a headache. I don't know why. Do you believe that the universe is eternal? I am pretty agnostic on the matter. You just said we don't know if it is speeding up or slowing down. So there was a paper that suggested it was slowing down, but that paper hasn't been, that paper was highly criticized by someone very, very knowledgeable, like the prime expert in the field. So I'm not really sure who to believe. I'm not an expert in that particular branch, that particular subfield. So I'm going to kind of like hold my breath here. If I were riding a train traveling at or close to the speed of light, it has to be close to because it can't be at, and I turned on a flashlight pointing the same way the train is traveling, what would I see, if anything? Well, if it bounced off of something, then you would see it bounce off of something. Because the light would travel out from your train at the speed of light from your perspective. How agitated do you get when you see science words used in pseudoscience word salad? It's kind of annoying. Why a physicist and not a pure mathematician? Because my heart's in the physics. The mathematics that is purely for its own sake and doesn't have any, like, I don't know, some sort of intuition behind it, even if it's like, even if we're talking about like a higher dimensional conformal geometry or whatever, I have some like physical intuition for what's going on. If it's just like, I don't know, purely for the love of the game, it's just is less interesting to me. From Ron Goldman with the $5, do you think celebrity and pop culture exposure has damaged the growth of the physics community? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so, at least not so much. Wait a minute, is Deathless Light here the greatest troll, the greatest lolcow of all time? Why don't you ever come up on debate days? Seems like you only come up when you know I'm not going to bring you up. What exactly are neutrinos? They are fundamental particles, as far as we can tell anyway. They have no charge, so they don't interact with the electromagnetic field, so you can't really see them, at least not directly. They have very, 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 very little mass. And consequently, they, as a result of having no charge and having no color charge either, no electromagnetic charge or color charge, they only interact via the weak nuclear force. So they're very, very hard to detect because they hardly interact with anything. The weak nuclear force is a weak force, as the name implies. They're also very, very low mass, so they're very, very hard to slow down and study. Like we can just put neutrons in a bottle and study them because neutrons are pretty heavy, and so we can slow them down. It's very, very hard to slow down neutrinos and study them in isolation. But they exist. We can detect them. You're a scientist, I'm a philosopher of science, your epistemology answers to us. You're a nothing. Deathless Light, you are nothing. You write AI books. One of the mass states could be massless. Okay, that's a good point. But I suspect it wouldn't be. That would be very disturbing if that were the case. All right, y'all, I am 20 minutes over, and I do have a doctor's appointment in the near future. So I'm going to end the live stream here. I will be back tomorrow for some more debates. In the meantime, make sure to go watch my, make sure to go subscribe to the YouTube channels at Blitz PhD for the main YouTube channel where science stuff goes and the vertical content goes. And go to at Dr. Blitz Debunks for the live stream content, the horizontal live stream content, and the debating and debunking videos. You can go find those there. So make sure to subscribe to both. I'm trying to grow both channels so that I can better support myself. Also, join the Discord server. If you're 18 years or older, make sure to go to discord.gg/drblitz. It's a cool place to be. You can get announcements from me about when I post videos, about when I'm live streaming. You can talk with like-minded people, etc. Finally, if you want to support me personally, rather than subscribing, there are ways to do it. I have a Patreon account, which you can subscribe to. There's also YouTube membership, which is like $4 or $5 a month, and you get some neat perks from doing it, including access to my notes. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Actually, yeah, so tomorrow I should see you. There should be no issues there. Friday's live stream might be a little bit late, but I'll see you anyway. Take care.